being sick.
Bill said, I'm not feeling too terribly well. And Jerry said, well, maybe you ought to eat something to help you settle your stomach. So he passed a can of tomatoes over to Bill. I was sitting in the center couch, so all this was going on right in front of me. As Jerry passed the can of tomatoes over, they floated from left to right before my eyes over to Bill. And a short while later, we heard some bad noises coming from Bill. And the can of tomatoes, minus the can, in a barf bag, floated right to left before my eyes.
They decided to throw Bill's sick bag out of the airlock. It was the first time that any of the three had been to space, and there was a lot to do.
So when Bill got sick, we got very concerned because we knew how much of the mountain of work that was sitting in front of us. So that's where we made our first mistake. We decided that we ought to get our feet underneath us here, so to speak, and make sure we got things organized before we start getting into a big flurry with the ground. So we delayed a little bit in talking to the ground about Bill's sickness. Of course, we were talking, recording everything we said, so they called us up a little while later and read the riot act to us about not telling them immediately. So that was a bad start.
The American Skylab space station was in orbit around the Earth so that astronauts could do research for scientists down on the ground. And Ed and the others were the last people to be sent there before the station was decommissioned.
Skylab 4 was the last flight of the Skylab, and people realized that if they were ever going to get something to fly in the near future, it had to be on that mission. So there's a lot of people who came on board with their experiments.
The three astronauts on the Skylab 4 mission were doing medical experiments on what happened to the human body during long-term spaceflight. They were studying the Earth from orbit and studying the Sun. Ed Gibson's background was in solar physics. They'd also taken a number of high school science experiments, including one looking at how spiders make webs in low gravity. It was going to be a busy few weeks, partly because the previous crew on Skylab 3 had been unusually efficient, which had set expectations high. But the Skylab 4 team started getting behind from the beginning.
As we started going along and working, Bill was only able to operate at less than his normal efficiency, and the workload was very high. So in that result, we fell behind what Mission Control desired. So they decided they were going to help us out by giving us a detailed instructions every morning. We got our instructions over a teleprinter. One morning we had about 60 feet of teleprinter message to cut up and divide up and understand before we even get to work.
All space missions run to a tight schedule, all the way down to exercise times and meal breaks. But the Skylab 4 astronauts felt their ground control team was being particularly bossy.
And I don't know if you've ever had to do something under the conditions of micromanagement. It's bad enough for an hour, but try 24 hours a day. We're just not constructive that way. We're not getting things done the way we should because we couldn't use our own judgment.
The astronauts were working 16-hour days, scheduled down to the minute. But they were starting to feel rebellious. They stopped shaving and grew beards.
And then we also got a briefing from them every morning, which was a lot of information, a lot of requests. So that took another half an hour out of our day. So we decided we'd be smart on this thing. And we'd just have one person listen to the ground control and then pass on needing information to the other two. Well, that worked real well, except in our fatigue condition up there.